Afternoon. We're at the Evansville Wartime Museum with Richard Paul, otherwise Duke. He's a Vietnam veteran, 63, 64, and 69, 70. Turn that book over and put it in front of you there, Richard. We're going to talk about intelligence. He was part of the intelligence squad.
Intelligence. We were called the Army Security Agency, and then when we went to Vietnam, it was so highly,
Classified. Highly classified that you...
classified, and so they changed our name to the 3rd Radio Research Unit, and later on the 509th Radio Research Group.
And why we're doing this is this has become unclassified recently, and now we can talk about it. Prior to recently, we could not talk about it.
That's right.
His book there is A Secret War. So let's just start, Richard or Duke. Let's start in 63 and what you did 63 and 64 in Vietnam, and where were you recruited? Where did you come from? And then tell us where you went to boot and why they thought you'd be good at intelligence.
I started out, my basic training was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts for Morse Code Intercept School. And from there I went to various different countries doing manual Morse Intercept.
What year did you enlist? What year and then when? I know you went to Vietnam, 63, 64. When did you enlist?
I enlisted in 1957.
So you were doing a lot of things up till 63. So you had 6 years in the service learning a lot of things, and they must have known you were pretty smart.
Well, I don't know about that. There's a thing in this book here that says that we had the most of any other units. We had the most college degrees and most intelligent personnel.
And so you were highly selected. So you had a lot of missions that you probably can't talk about between 56 or 57 and 63. So you really can't even talk about those.
Correct.
A lot of this is top secret. But now, so let's fast forward. You got tons of good training and tons of really intelligent stuff from 57. This was the key to our Cold War. Remember, 57 Sputnik went up, and then we had the Cuban crisis, 62, 63, and the Bay of Pigs. And the Cuban crisis, we were at DEFCON 2, which we were close to a nuclear catastrophe with Khrushchev and Kennedy. So this was all Cold War. Now all of a sudden we moved to Vietnam and we can't do the nuclear stuff. And so let's talk about Vietnam 63, 64, Richard.
Okay, 1963, well, we were the first unit to go to Vietnam. The first 4 years, we had civilian clothes people over there. They lived in the hotels and so on and so forth. And gradually they integrated into us doing this intelligence ourselves and training the South Vietnamese troops to do what we did. And what it was...
What city were you living in South Vietnam?
And the first time in Saigon for a while.
In civilian clothes and in a hotel?
I wasn't. When I got there in 63, they started letting us wear our uniforms, but the main deployment and everything of the actual fighting soldier was not until 1964, 65. I would like to read something here. This is by General Bruce Palmer, Vice Chief of Staff, U.S. Army. Field commanders in Vietnam continue to say that this signals intelligence is the backbone of their intelligence effort. They can live or can't live or fight without it. I want to stress everyone in this room just how important this effort is. I can't think of anything more important because they are just blind over there without this effort. I wanted to include that in there.
So really you were the backbone of finding out where the North Vietnamese were and what we should do, and intelligence to try to find out what we should do. It's essentially reconnaissance. And it's like a plane can go look at things a person can go tell you things, but you were trying to learn. How did you learn your information?
Well, the information, the main thing that we did is they configured an aircraft and they put a dipole antenna on each wing, and they would know a general area of an enemy unit. So, but not specific. It could be anywhere in that area. So then we would go up. They would send us a signal from the ground to the specific targets that was sending Morse code. We'd go up there. The pilot would have a map on his thigh, and what he would do is he would take that aircraft, take that signal, hear that signal, and he would flatten the aircraft, turn it back and forth, and when he got a no sound, that's the direction it's coming from. So then he would tip the aircraft over, plot his position on here, and then he would go in and take shots as long as that signal was up. And
Take photographs.
no photographs.
No photographs. What kind of shots? You said
Well,
shots.
I say shots. They go over there and get the signal, and then
So he was getting latitude and longitude to get the exact degrees of where he was, and because there was no signal, it meant the enemy was there. What does no
No.
signal mean?
no signal means that if he moves this thing back and forth and back and forth, he can get the signal here, but here he didn't get the signal. That's the direction it's coming from.
I see the direction.
So-
So the enemy was sending a radar or something,
No, they were
just
sending
radio.
Morse code.
The enemy was sending Morse code at him, thinking he was
Not at him at all. They didn't know he was there.
just send it to anywhere.
Right.
I see.
Right.
And they were communicating by Morse code, and this was really an intercepting of Morse code, and then you would have to take that back and decode it. Did you get the
Right.
Morse code? You didn't get it. You didn't get the Morse code.
Well,
Read.
we already knew that they knew what they come up a lot of times at specific times, and we have blanketed a place and picked up different signals and so on and so forth. Then we would go back and then on map and wherever it triangulated, they'd draw a line here. Here's the next shot. Draw a line here. Draw a line here. Where they triangulated, that's where that enemy was. And many times those pilots would get them within 100 or 200 meters of where that transmitter was. That's where the enemy is.
Why didn't that enemy shoot that aircraft down?
Well, a lot of times they didn't see it.
Was it high? Was it? How high?
Well,
5,000 feet?
We didn't go all that high, but far out.
I see.
So later on in the war, they got more sophisticated aircraft and stuff down the years past.
Well, that's pretty good detective work. That went in 63 and 64. When 69 and 70 you went back, they did a different technology or a similar?
No, they had the same technology, but they had more sophisticated stuff and a different aircraft,
Yeah.
bigger aircraft. They came out with one that had an antenna down below it. So they they got more sophisticated with it and more accurate.
So they would be able to tell Westmoreland what was going on. Westmoreland was in charge of the Army at that time.
Yes.
And they'd be able to give him and LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, information to say we think troops are there, so we wouldn't waste our troops.
I didn't. I don't think it went all the way up.
Or McNamara didn't go that high.
We would take that information and get South Vietnamese field commanders ready to go in and hit the enemy, but they needed to know where the enemy was. Later on, our troops are doing the same thing. We were giving that information to our troops once they built up in Vietnam.
So but it was taken over by the South Vietnamese first, and then you gave it to the Americans, because Americans
Correct.
moved in about 64, 65.
Correct.
And so then all the way till 73, the Americans were there. You
Right.
gave that same type of information to the Americans, so they were used information. It's just radio waves or Morse code waves, and you found out where they cut off, and they didn't cut off. And the North Vietnamese must have communicated a lot by Morse code.
Yes.
And we could decode it. It wasn't a problem decoding them
Well,
information.
yeah, now that's a different story. Now, sometimes you could and sometimes you couldn't. But the main thing is, we locate the enemy and then wipe them out.
Yeah, so it helped you know where they were. You
Right.
didn't know what they were doing, but by having the Morse code.
Right.
Okay, now what other were your tricks there, or really expertise in reconnaissance or intelligence? Tell us what other you did, Duke.
Well, I can't really answer that.
Okay, because that's top secret still. That's still classified.
The
You
only
can't say
thing
that.
I can.
Turn around and show that
in this
book. Turn around and show it.
Oh,
Put it up there, right there. I'll read it. The most secret war, Army signals intelligence in Vietnam. And that was a copyright recently.
oh, it's been several years back.
What's the date on it, copyright?
There's no copyright on it.
And who wrote that?
The James Gilbert Military History Office, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, Fort Belvoir, Missouri.
What year is it?
Virginia.
What year
It
is it?
doesn't have a year.
Okay, but that, he tells about what you just said. He pretty much outlines that in the book.
Right. And it goes on, what I'm interested in is the first four years we were there. And when our troops got there, once we're there, there was a lot of intelligence that could not be revealed. See, other than Vietnam, well, I can't even say that, but normally Army Security Agency, we work for National Security Agency.
Yeah.
Listening in.
Well, how much do you think this affected the war?
It had a dramatic effect to the war.
How do you know that?
From the successes they had on doing the airborne radio direction finding.
I see. So the Army actually would feed back to you and say, hey, there were troops there. It wasn't a lie. But they had to move pretty fast because the Vietnamese troops could have moved from that position. But in general, it's a little bit of inertia. They wouldn't move that fast. But your Army troops that went into these areas, you said the enemy's there, you were right most of the time.
Yes.
How you know that?
Well, me personally, I don't know that. I just go by what this guy said right here.
Uh-huh.
We had many successes. The first man killed by hostile fire in Vietnam was from our unit. In that first four-year period, the first one to be decorated, we were the first ones. The first presidential unit citation for what we contributed to the war, we were the first one to get that.
This technology you're talking about, Duke, did they use that in Korea or in World War II?
They didn't have it in Korean War.
They had radar.
Well, they may have, but we didn't have radar. Our unit didn't. This is signal intelligence, listening in on the enemy.
Listen for their signal.
Yes.
We didn't do that in Korea and in World War II.
No, not with the capability that we had later on.
I see. What do you tell them?
See, the Armed Security Agency, I don't remember exactly. I think it's 1945 is when was the inception.
I see. So it's a little later.
Right.
Now, this type of security, you can't say, but are we doing that right now? Just a higher level of this, at a much more sophisticated level. It's like when the submarines come in, they demagnetize you, and we're intercepting all kinds of things, and you're jamming the other people's information. You jam the radios.
We had jammers also.
So you were jamming radios as well, so they
Yes.
wouldn't. You jammed their radios, they
Right.
couldn't talk to each other.
But also the enemy had jammers also.
They jammed at
For
you.
ours.
That wasn't in World War II, was it? Jammers, or they have
I
radio?
have no idea. I don't know.
Well, why are you telling us this? This is pretty interesting information because it just got allowed to be declassified.
Well, when they came out with books after the war
Yeah.
of different units in Vietnam and what they did, we were never mentioned up until about 10 years ago. And then they wrote this book and it was declassified, and so we could get credit for what we contributed to the war.
Because really, you're the scout, and the scout is the most dangerous job. And
We didn't send scouts out.
but the plane's a scout. They could have shot your plane down. That's sort of a scout. I mean, it's a dangerous job that you were doing, but it's so important. But they never even wrote about you because they weren't allowed to hear about you till just the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So we're in 2022. They just started revealing this about 2010. Nobody knows how effective this was.
No, that's right. That's the reason I'm here. I wanted to get the word out that there was more to that war than was. Of course, the combat troop is the most important.
Yeah.
The most important.
But he has
We
to
did
know.
what we could. We
Yeah.
did what we could to assist him in locating the enemy, so they could know, instead of just like in the Korean War and stuff like that, they just went out by word of mouth or just trial and error or whatever to meet the enemy.
And it was cold. It
Was terrible.
did how much different was Vietnam to you, 63, 64 to 69, 70? 69, 70 is right in the middle of it. That was during the famous bombing in Cambodia too, and also the Agent Orange. How did you get exposed to Agent Orange? And were you in the Cambodia episode or
No,
napalm?
No. The last 4 months I was there in 69 and 70. In 69, I was in charge of the Manuel Morris School and also voice, Vietnamese linguist.
Yeah.
So about 4 months before I was supposed to deploy, I took the class that was graduating, a company-sized unit, way down south Bach Lu, and I was their advisor when
Wow.
I was there.
Right before you left in 70, you had to tell them all your knowledge. So
Well, we trained them to do the things that we did,
yeah,
so,
same type, Morse code.
yes.
They try to
Yes, yes.
try to figure out where it was coming, where it wasn't coming from.
Right.
Now, what do you think about? This is retrospective 50 years. What do you think about the Vietnam War and the effects it has on America? And how many Vietnam vets we had? We lost 50,000 or 56,000 vets in Vietnam War, 36,000 in Korean War. But we lost a lot. But there was at that time it was a very liberal nation, and there were a lot of yays and nays to Vietnam War. McNamara and LBJ probably lost his popularity because
Right.
even though he had he passed more social laws and social things for the United States than any other president because he controlled both houses. But he went down and not a very famous person because of the Vietnam War, because the public didn't like it. And this was war never declared. We've only had 8 wars declared in our country. It was never actually declared. Even Korea was not a declared war. So
Still hasn't.
and so what's your thoughts on that? You've got a lot of wisdom after 50 years, and maybe you can't say it, but for the next generation, what's your thoughts about it, Duke? About why we went to war, and how we're working for our freedom, and then the problem with the country. Some people agreed with it, some people didn't. It's a terrible thing to have a split in emotion. Where World War II, there was not a split in emotion.
Well, I have a hard time remembering,
Yeah.
but I say we, me and my compadres or whatever, just one example, we knew they were building the missile silos in North Vietnam and so on and so on, no way around and everything, and we never did anything about it. They waited till they were completed. Then when our pilots, Air Force pilots went over there, they shot them down. So, that part of us, and the political aspect of it, like you were just talking about, it's all politicians. You got generals and officers and so on and so forth fighting a war, but you've got Congress and the Senate people and the president running the war, basically. So we weren't happy about that. We talked about that.
Because they said LBJ would talk to McNamara and they would talk to Westmoreland. They tried to direct some of it from the armchair, and
Yeah.
that was some of the criticisms. I don't know what's true and what isn't, but some of that was thought about. Well, I can't thank you enough, Duke, for giving us this information. We'll have to have somebody talk at our monthly talks down here about this, because not many people are aware of this.
Oh, okay.
Do you have other comments that you want to summarize for us?
No, I just thought we would be going through the book here and taking pictures and stuff of equipment and different things and so on.
Well, I would like to take several pictures, but not the whole book. Why don't you tag?
Well, I'm not doing the whole book anyway. I'm just doing basically the first 4.
Okay, what you do is we're gonna take a little break, and I'm gonna let you tag the pages, and then we will go through it with the film and let you point and say what was important, so people can visually see what we're talking about. I think it'd be very helpful. So
Okay.
I'm gonna turn it off. Still here with Duke, and we're gonna go over this book. This book was published not too long ago. Remember, all this information just became available in the last 10 years. This book is called The Most Secret War. There's no copyright date. It's Army signals in intelligence in Vietnam. Now, these things just started at that time. We still use some of this technology in flying today. So we're going through the book of important parts. Now, in Vietnam, you look at this building here, or this on a truck, a lot of this intelligence was on the ground until Vietnam. We're going to show you. So show what was in this building. Tell us what was in this building, Duke.
There was intercept equipment. It could be used for voice, or it could be used for manual Mars, getting the information from the enemy, monitoring the enemy.
So this is the same technology we just talked about in the air, but most of it was on the ground until 63, 64, and then this came available at a later time. And this is you, or?
No, that's not me. These are the ones in civilian clothes were our people. These 2 right here.
Yeah, because you were helping the Vietnam at that time, the South Vietnamese trying to get location of the enemy, and this is via Morse code and things. So now we're going to go show you. This is one that was mounted on a car, on a Jeep. It was on a half-ton vehicle. So all this interceptor radio stuff was there, located on a half-ton.
Some of it, yes.
Some of it.
Yeah.
And they were doing the same thing, trying to drive and find out where the Morse code was sent out and where it wasn't, and then they'd find a blank spot. This was 61 to 64, and we were helping the South Vietnamese do this. Put your pointer on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, this was the PRD-1s, they call it, with direction finding. And they would sit still, and then they would rotate the antenna and had the degrees on the bottom, and they would rotate it to find out what direction that signal was coming from. And they would have maybe 2 or 3 out there also, so they could monitor the same signal and triangulate and locate the enemy.
So better than what I said. Essentially, that's in the middle of a circle, this Jeep with all the equipment, and he would send out waves, and he would be able to tell, and there were 2 or 3 others around, and they'd put the data together. Is that right?
Basically, yes.
What's PRD stand for?
Oh,
Primary direction finder. Primary. Okay, now we're going to, what was a big invention in Vietnam is here we've got in a cockpit of a U-6. This is a U-6. That's a 1-prop plane, and Duke was in that, and there's not much room for the pilot plus him, and so they would fly over, and we'll see a plane in a minute, but they would fly over the enemy area and wait for the Morse code direction to change. Talk about this radio here and this plane here a little bit. We'll see another part of the plane.
that's just a regular R390 is what it was called, but it was a radio receiver, and you would tune in. This is what you tuned it in with. This is to do different things, tweeting the signal coming in and so on and so forth.
Okay, and then what happened is you look at the triangle here, you look at this and explain the 3 planes and then that send that signal there. Explain that.
Okay, from the ground, they would notify us by Morse code to the person receiving the signal, and they would take that signal and send it up to the pilot, and the pilot would rotate the aircraft and everything, note where he was and what direction that signal was coming. When he got a null, no sound, that's the directions come. So we'd notate his position on the ground, and then the degrees, 360 degrees or 340 degrees or whatever. Then he would move on over, take another shot, as we call it. Then he'd go over and take another shot. And in a lot of cases, they would take more than that. The more
This is the
accurately-
enemy radio shooting Morse code out. This is the enemy
Yes,
radio.
yes.
Right here is enemy radio and shooting Morse code out. We're trying to figure out where that is from, and so we're doing flying around as opposed to just on the ground.
Right, and it's a much more accurate at that time. And we would go plot that on a map back in the headquarters, and then wherever it triangulated, that's where that enemy transmitter was. And then we would give that information to the South Vietnamese commander that's in that area and give him that information, and they would go in and hit them.
So this is intelligence done by Duke in 63 and 64. Now this is the plane. When we move from the ground to the plane, this is what the plane looked like. This is a U-6 plane. And talk about the plane a little bit there, Duke.
Well, the plane is a single-engine aircraft, and you may not be able to see, but it's got like a whip antenna that's above and below the wing on each wing, and that's what you received your signal from.
Okay, so that was a big change in technology. This is called ARCD?
No, Army Radio, Airborne Radio Direction Finding,
They
ARD.
still have it in today's world, airborne. And this is a bigger plane called a U-8. And you flew in that as well, just bigger, but the same radio connections, right?
Right. We had 3 U-6s at that time, and then we had 2 of these. They were actually F model. What is the airplane? In civilian life is what it was.
I see. I don't know what it was.
I can't
But it's a
remember.
double engine and a little faster, a little higher. But if you
Right.
look at it, a couple more antennas on the top.
Yeah.
But that's really what he's talking about. This is a U-8 used in Vietnam. Okay, this is a totally different topic, but this is a troop on the ground, and we just told you how we get directional finding in the air, but this guy's on the ground eavesdropping on the Vietnamese. Tell us, Duke, what he's doing.
Well, I really can't tell.
He's adjusting things.
Yeah, it was nothing that I was involved in at the time I was over there, but I just wanted to notate that.
Okay, but he's on the ground, probably listening and eavesdropping. Okay, this was a troop that was lost, and this is his funeral. Tell us about it, Duke, and why he could not be recognized.
Can you erase that?
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
I said, this was actually it wasn't Davis. This is later. Davis was earlier.
Okay.
These 2 are the ones that were at the ball field and both got killed. They were sitting in the bleachers and the bombs went off and killed them.
February 64. So it was a terrorist act to them in the ball field.
Yeah.
So they, and it was terrorist act on them. Go ahead.
This is the billeting and the headquarters for the 509th Radio Research Davis Station. That's where I was billeted also. And this was what we lived in right here, but there had more of a... We were right over the fence from the airport where our planes took off. And
In
so on.
Saigon.
In Saigon.
And so they're saying in 509 Radio Research Group, remember, it's really an intelligence group. They wanted to camouflage. That said just
Correct.
radio research, where really should have been intelligence, but the enemy would have figured out things and they
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
want.
Oh, yeah.
And you were right there at that same thing.
Yeah, I was right there, yeah.
It says near the delta to the DMZ, widely dispersed ASA elements. These are the Morse code tip-off people where the information came. Okay, go ahead and explain it, Duke.
They would locate the signal from the receivers, and they would send that by Morse code up to the aircraft, to the operator in the aircraft, and then pipe that up to the pilot.
And what did the pilot want with that information? It would tell him.
Well, all he didn't copy Morse code, but he just heard it,
I see.
and he would hear it, because they would go pretty fast sometimes, and that's what he would listen to, and listen for the null to where there was no signal.
And he would tell them there's a null, and then they would.
No, he wouldn't tell them anything. This guy here would tip off the aircraft.
To tell him what area to go to.
But he already knew what area, because
Okay. What did he tip them off about?
he would tell us that the signal is up and you can go ahead and do your work.
Okay, because sometimes they didn't have a signal going. The North Vietnamese didn't have a signal going. Is that right?
Well, we already knew what we were looking for.
Right.
So we weren't searching
Yeah.
over the airwaves or anything like that. We were just up there to receive the information that the signal was up, and then we took it from there.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, this was our ground forces that, in fact, this was actually one of the,
Commanders.
he was a special forces.
I see.
See, so that may be special forces doing that at that time. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But that's the PRD-1 ground-based radio direction finding. This was the antenna, which was a diamond-shaped thing. And down here, it was all the degrees, 360 degrees. So when they turned it around, they would notate the same as in the aircraft, that signal's coming from this, how many degrees.
Okay, this is a ground unit getting the signal.
Yeah.
This is again Duke, and Duke is going to summarize what we just saw pictorially. So he was there 6364. He'll say what was there before 6364, then what air invention we did 6364, and how it was more advanced in 6970. Go ahead, Duke.
Okay, when we first went over there, they went over in civilian clothes and lived in a hotel, and we were not supposed to be there. And so we had a cover story of who we were and so on and so forth. Well, most of that came after the civilian clothes thing. Then in 64, 65, they started the buildup of ground troops. When we were there as in civilian clothes and everything, we were training also the South Vietnamese Army. So that we were teaching them. Then when we got to ARDF, the Airborne Radio Direction Finding, we taught their pilots and their operators to take over what we were doing or help what we were doing.
So what you're saying there, Duke, is this radio direction finder was a key in intelligence, and this has just been released in 2010 to 2012. The book you've got that we looked at earlier, and we showed you some of what the equipment looked like. But it's a tremendous advance, and you were part of it you were in the Army 57 to 70s, and you were able to...
77.
Okay. Duke, summarize things on yourself.
I'm Duke Paul, and I was born January 23rd, 1940, and
In the Army, you enlisted in 57 from Evansville, Indiana.
correct.
And then you enlisted in the Army in 57 and stayed in the Army till the 70s.
77.
So you had 20 years in.
Yes,
So you're a really retired Army.
yes, I am.
So you do get a pension.
Yes.
All right, so, and then you had about 4 years in Vietnam, 63,
No,
60.
no. The tour of duty there was 11 months. So the first time I was there was 11 months, but it was 63, 64.
And the second time?
69, 70.
I see.
Correct.
And what do you need to tell these students and other people listening? What's your thoughts about Vietnam, and what's your thoughts about the Army? What's your thoughts about patriotism? Patriotism first.
Well, patriotism, I am a patriot. I believe in supporting our troops wherever they may go, and wish them the best of luck. And
And the second thing is patriotism. What you said is you're a supporter of our country,
yes,
and whatever our commander-in-chief says, you're going to go with him.
correct.
The second thing, we know about World War One, World War Two, Korea, but Vietnamese was a debatable war, and we don't get too in depth about it. But you were a troop. There are a lot of non-troops that said we should have been at war, so it was a dichotomy in our country. Can you speak to that?
Well,
You were a
can't,
supporter. You were a supporter, and
I
there
was
were a lot of anti-Vietnamese people.
Absolutely. There were things that were happening, and the decisions made by the Congress and the president and everybody that we didn't agree with. However, we were troops, and we did our job, and I don't regret that at all.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I was a participant in that war. So we may not agree with all the decisions and stuff they did, but they were our commanders and we were the troops, and we did what we were supposed to do. I have no regrets.
Okay, well, thanks for all this time. This is a summary on what intelligence in Vietnam with radio waves. Very interesting, just revealed in about 2010. And he was right in the middle of it, and this is the first time he's able to speak on it. Thank you very much, Duke.
Thank you.
Richard Paul Duke.
Correct.